File 3154 in front of us, which ratifies the labor contracts and compensation plans for state employees in the executive branch, as well as the faculty at our universities, the interfaculty organization. And if members remember, Majority Leader Gazelka made a commitment on the Senate floor a few weeks ago that our plan in the Senate was to have these contracts voted on in the Senate prior to our Easter Passover break. So we are honoring that commitment, and today is our second stop and final stop before we head to the Senate floor, of course, if we get the support of this committee. And along with me today is Mr. Hubinger from the LCC, who can explain more of the details of the contracts if members have questions, and he may want to just give a brief overview of the process before we proceed.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Welcome, Mr. Hubinger.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'm Greg Hubinger with the Legislative Coordinating Commission and the Subcommittee on Employee Relations. Senator Miller's bill ratifies 8 collective bargaining agreements and 4 compensation plans for unrepresented employees. These contracts and plans cover about 42,000 state employees. They're for the current biennium, the 18-19 biennium, and by the terms of those contracts, they're effective July 1st of 2017. I'll focus just on the compensation and the fiscal impacts. Most of the contracts provide a 2% cost of living adjustment effective July 1st of 2017, and a 2.25% increase effective July 1st of 2018. The contracts also continue existing language in each of the contracts and plans that provide for step increases, merit-based increases that vary depending on the contract or plan. Those merit increases depend on the performance of the employee and range from 2.75% to about 4%. About half of state employees are eligible for those increases. The other half are at the maximum of their salary ranges and so are not eligible for them. In terms of fiscal impacts, the subcommittee has a spreadsheet that it uses for tracking the costs of contracts. It's on the last page of the summary I think that staff provided. MMB estimates that the average fiscal impact of these contracts on the current biennium is about 3.4%, and they're estimated to have an impact of about 4.75% on the next biennium. Madam Chair, that's a quick overview of the fiscal side of these contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Hubinger. Are there any questions for Mr. Hubinger? Senator Fischbach.
Madam Chair, I don't have a question, but I have an amendment when that would be appropriate, when you're willing to. Thank you.
Senator Western.
Madam Chair, Mr. Hubinger, you mentioned 2% starting July 2017 and a 2.25% in 2018. So over the biennium, a 4.25% increase plus the steps and lines, you said?
Mr. Hubinger.
Madam Chair and Senator Westrom, that's correct. The step increases are only available to employees who are not at the top of their salary ranges and who have satisfactory or better performance.
Madam Chair, Mr. Hubinger, last year when the legislature set its budget, can you refresh us on what the increase was? I recall about a 1.8% increase. Where did the extra money come from?
Mr. Hubinger.
Madam Chair and Senator Westrom, the 1.8% increase in operating budgets is what I understand was provided as well. I think there were 2 pieces. One, MMB in their instructions to agencies in developing their biennial budget proposals instructed agencies to plan on insurance increases of about 8.9% for calendar year 18. The reality came in at a lower number based on the experience of the state employee group as a whole, and that premium increase was only 2.85%. As I understand, those saved dollars were used in other parts of the negotiations for these contracts.
Last question, Madam Chair. So
Senator Western.
2 years out, what is the new expectation or the new number that we're going to be committed to beyond what the budget has in its base?
Mr. Hubinger.
Madam Chair and Senator Westrom, MMB estimates that the fiscal impact of these contracts on the next biennium is 4.74%. That's a total of about $395 million. That includes all funds. About a third of that amount is for general funded positions.
Very good. Thanks, Madam.
Mr. Naumann, anything to add?
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, just in response to Senator Westrom's question, the 1.8% was what was assumed in the governor's budget. Not every agency received that 1.8% increase. In the end, the final budget negotiations gave some agencies something akin to that. Some got a little bit more, some got less, there were a few that got nothing.
Senator Westrom?
So, Madam Chair, Eric, Mr. Malman, either way, the amount doesn't match the 4.25%, and I think Mr. Hubinger stating at the end of we're at $395 million wouldn't be covered and would have to come out of future spending or appropriations. And is that I think that's what the numbers add up to? Is that your understanding as well?
Mr. Naumann?
Madam Chair, Senator Westrom, I don't have any disagreement with the testimony that is provided to you. I just wanted to clarify that not every agency received the 1.8%. That was a number that was assumed in the governor's budget, but it was not what the final negotiations gave all agencies in the 18-19 budget after the 2017 session.
Super. Senator Bentsen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if Commissioner Frans would be available to answer some questions.
Good morning. Welcome, Commissioner Frans.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Myron Frans, Commissioner of Minnesota Management and Budget.
Senator Bentsen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. Wanted to ask about some talent retention concerns that exist, particularly in places like Minute. Highly competitive IT market, not just competitive salaries, but competitive with benefits package, work environment. Does this contract give sufficient flexibility for the new Commissioner of Minute to hire, retain, or dismiss talent as she needs to reform that agency?
Commissioner Frans.
Madam Chair, Senator, you know, one of the concerns as you're very well aware and very knowledgeable about some of the difficult positions that we have to fill around the state agency, the work you do in HHS in particular. You're aware of the human service technicians, the registered nurses, the licensed, and you are very aware that we have difficulty retaining and recruiting those folks. And there are occasions when we have to approve some kind of hiring bonus or some sort of adjustment. And so we have that flexibility generally to do that. I think one of the difficulties in the IT area is we've already made some adjustment to that salary structure to, I guess, reflect the market changes and the market cost of retaining and hiring IT personnel. I think we do have some flexibility to make these hard to fill position changes where we authorize hiring bonus or something along those lines. So we do have that flexibility generally, but I think one of the things that I've talked to Commissioner Clyburn just recently, and as we move through this process, which is obviously fluid on a daily basis, there is a concern about regardless of how the legislature and the governor come out in this final session about IT and how we should support that, we do need to think, I think, from a long-term perspective, as you're suggesting, how do we want to stand up that platform so that we retain, in particular, but also hire these very talented people that are critical to that function? Because, as you know, there's always this tension between bringing in outside contractors, which sometimes you need to do because they have the talent, they have the skill, and you just need it for a short period of time. But there are so many occasions when we're building new systems, we want the current employees, state employees, working alongside those people to understand the system, retain that talent going forward. So I think we have some flexibility. I think we should consider, and Commissioner Clyburn and I will continue to discuss, do we need more tools? I think we have some.
Commissioner Benson, Senator Benson, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Not sure if that's a promotion or a demotion on this day, Madam Chair.
That does
but,
ring really well.
I wanted to make sure that we get something on the record. Commissioner Clyburn has a very challenging task if she's going to turn around minute, and I do not believe these contracts give her the tools she needs to compete in a rapidly evolving employment space. And if we don't make changes soon, we are going to find ourselves straddled in a way that the private market will not, and that puts us further behind the 8 ball in making minutes successful. So thank you, Commissioner, for your time today.
Further questions? Senator, oh, excuse me. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Numbers, Mr. Hubinger, employee numbers were mentioned here. I'm just going to ask the question, how many state employees do we have now compared to 2000? You know?
Mr. Hubinger.
Can you get those numbers to me? Or would you not be the guy I would talk to?
Mr. Hubinger.
Madam Chair, Senator Ingebrigtsen, I would work with MMB to get you those numbers.
Okay,
Senator,
thank you.
We'll get you that, yeah.
Further questions? Okay. Senator Miller or Mr. Hubinger, what is the status of the contracts not in this bill?
Madam Chair, there are 3 contracts that continue in negotiations. The Minnesota Law Enforcement Association, that includes the troopers and the conservation officers and the BCA agents, the Minnesota State College faculty, the 2-year faculty, and then the Minnesota State University Administrative and Service Faculty Unit.
Okay. Good question. Senator Fischbach, you have the amendment?
Madam Chair, I have the A6 amendment that I'd like to offer.
Senator Fischbach moves the A6 amendment.
Do you have a time? Do we know what?
It's being passed out right now. Senator Fischbach, would you like to explain this, or Senator Miller?
And maybe very quickly, I can just, it adds the Minnesota nurses and the Minnesota State Personnel Plan for administrators from Minnesota State. And my understanding is if we have questions on the details, that possibly Mr. Hubinger can answer them, or there may be someone in the audience, is my understanding, that could answer the questions. That I'm getting nods, so there are questions. We have folks who can answer the questions.
Thank you, Senator Fischbach. Senator Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the amendment that Senator Fischbach is offering, Mr. Hubinger mentioned the 3 contracts that are still outstanding or still in negotiations. There are 2 that have been agreed to, and these are the 2 that Senator Fischbach is offering in the amendment. And these 2 were agreed to after the bill was introduced, and so I would consider this a friendly amendment, and I thank Senator Fischbach for bringing this forward so we can add the 2 contracts that have been agreed to this larger package. And when the other 3 that are still outstanding, when those are finished, we're not sure if that's going to be prior to us finishing session or not. We will reevaluate at that time. It might be too late in session to take care of those 3 just because of the timing, but this amendment I'm supportive of, and I thank Senator Fischbach for bringing it forward.
Questions to the A6 amendment? Senator Fischbach renews her motion on the A6 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. To the bill, to the amended bill, Senate File 3154. Further questions, members? Senator Benson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Miller for carrying this bill. It did go through the Subcommittee on Employee Relations. One of the things that was revealed in the subcommittee is that the health savings were in fact used to backfill, and so we're raising the base overall instead of putting those health care savings into reserves for our CGIP plan. We need to make sure that is stable. It should be looked at separately by this committee at some point to make sure that we are paying close attention to what the reserve balances are in our plan. While health costs have not grown as expected over the last couple of years, that doesn't mean that they will continue to remain at below market rates, and sufficient reserves will be important. By raising the base, that extra $123 million, it sets us up for years to come to continue to fill with general fund money and not just health savings. And so I think probably not the wisest negotiating technique. We need to start looking at CGIP as its own separate fiscal entity and not conflate it with all of the contracts. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Duly noted. Thank you, Senator Bentsen. Further questions, comments? Senator Fischbach.
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to move Senate File 3154 as amended to the floor.
All those in favor to Senator Fischbach's motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion prevails.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and I do want to thank Senator Bentsen for her leadership and the rest of the folks that were on the LCC. They put in a tremendous amount of work and effort in working through these contracts, and I agree with her comments, and hopefully we can do better in those negotiations, or MMB and the groups can do better in those negotiations in the future. But thank you, Madam Chair and members, for your work today.
And members, expect one more meeting next week, a second deadline. Just follow your email. Further questions? Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.